Welcome to the 2000 Cubit Rule. It is your host, Mark Rowan. We are excited to be together again, having great conversations with great people, where we're making room for God to move. And today is going to be no different in that idea. And we want to remind people that when it comes to your technology, if you need help simplifying that so you can amplify your message, look out for us. Go to our website, SheepFeast.com. We'd love to talk to you about that and how you can consolidate some of that technology and potentially help you save time and definitely run things better. So that's a little about us. But today we're excited to host our special guest, and she has a long history of leadership in the education realm. And now she's turning that expertise and she's helping others lead well. And she has a book and a podcast and lots of cool things going on. We're so excited to have Bethany Rees. How are you doing today, Bethany?
I am fabulous. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I'm so excited for our conversation.
100%. Now, I got the opportunity to be on your podcast too, and that's going to happen at some point later in the future. So, we'll make sure people see that when that comes out as well. So we're returning the favor, and it's exciting that we get to hear more about what you're doing. And like I said, you started out kind of in the education space, and you can tell us a little bit more about that. But we'd love just to get a little bit of your background. How did you end up in education? And was that something that you grew up as a little child and like, you know what, I'm going to help kids and teachers and all that? Or was that something that developed over time?
Oh man. So I am from small town Arkansas, raised on a farm, and I just wanted the simple life. So I wanted to be a mom forever. So what is a career that aligns with momhood? Being a teacher, of course, right? So I wrote this amazing story for my life of I'm going to be a history teacher. I'm going to dress up in costume, use amazing music, amazing like voices, and then I'm going to do that for 30 years, retire and be the most amazing mom, teacher, and then grandma. And then God said, thank you for your story submission, but I'm going to rewrite it a little bit. So, my journey, I did spend almost 20 years in education, but I moved from small town Arkansas to the massive city of Houston. And then I rose through being a teacher to an instructional coach and then a high school administrator that opened a brand new 6A high school in Texas. And that's something you ever want to do once. So when it comes to education, but also just leadership in general, I feel like I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, been through every kind of scenario you can possibly imagine. And yeah, I have some limps. So now I walk with a leadership limp. And I just feel like God has called me into going out and serving other people and helping them navigate their own wilderness of leadership.
Excellent. We loved hearing that. And so you said, the 6A school that you had the opportunity to open up, you said obviously it's only something you wanted to do one time. But obviously you're talking about leadership on the rocks. So I'm sure there's a lot of rocky moments. You even have a lot of rocks in your background. It's the first time I'm connecting the dots here. I'm a little bit slow.
Oh, yeah, it's on
But
purpose.
but yeah, so that you think about education, and sometimes people may not connect the dots. Like, how does that relate to someone that's maybe running a business or a different type of organization? But leadership principles are kind of universal, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. The whole concept of leadership on the rocks, whenever people are struggling, they say, my marriage is on the rocks. I'm so stressed out. I'm going to have a drink on the rocks. And so this on the rocks mentality it is a struggle. Things are not going well. And a lot of people in leadership, they feel like they probably take this typical journey of the mountaintop of promotion. I cannot wait to be in that leadership position, that corner office, that title, that to-do list, that team, get all those things. I'm going to do this, this, and this. So they're on the mountaintop of promotion. And then it's an immediate landslide of reality of problems, conflicts, and constraints. So you hit the nail on the head. Leadership principles are very principle based. It doesn't really matter the industry you're in. And so as you slide down that, landslide of reality, problems, conflicts, and constraints, a lot of leaders end up in that valley of just overwhelm. I don't know how to go for it. I don't know how to, get out of my despair of how to stop firefighting. And you're asking all these questions. Is this what leadership is really like? Is this all there is to life? And you sit there. And so really you've got to turn that concept of on the rocks in a negative sense to, wait a second. Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 7, at the end of his amazing Sermon on the Mount, hey, If you put these words of mine into practice, you'll be like a wise man who built his house on the rocks. And when the storms came and when the floods rose, his house stood firm. So storms are coming no matter what leadership title you have, whether it's at home or in the workspace, no matter what industry you're in, storms are coming. And we want to make sure that we build our leadership on the rocks, especially the rock of Jesus Christ, versus that sandcastle life and leadership. So that's kind of the focus. And leadership is leadership. It doesn't matter if it's at home, at work. We want to lead well everywhere we are. How can we build it on the rocks? With the most essential rock being Jesus.
Yes, Jesus. He is the key to true leadership. He's modeled that throughout the Bible. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's the person we want to follow, right? You mentioned the problems, constraints, and then there was another one,
Conflicts. Oh, yes.
conflicts.
Lots of
Yes.
conflict in leadership.
And of course, sometimes you know, a problem, it can be a conflict or whatever, but how would you
Mhm.
define those three kind of big areas that you just laid out for us? Like how do they look and how do you address them?
No, absolutely. So let's start with conflict. Whenever you are in leadership, it is all about the people. You're no longer doing the task. You know, a lot of us start out doing the task and we do it really well. Therefore, we get the promotion. But whenever you step into a leadership role, you're no longer doing the task. You are leading the people that do the task. And when it comes to leading people, you have different personalities, different vision or missions, or how we're getting things accomplished, and different ways of communicating, and different skill sets. And immediately you have conflict. And so you're spending a lot of time navigating the conflict of here was the expectation, you're not meeting it, you're exceeding it, or you just can't get along with other people or stakeholders, or there's a lack of communication that was just a misunderstanding that led to conflict. So conflict is anytime there is miscommunication or a mismatch of words, of understanding, or even of expectation followed by, the performance on the job. So you get conflict in that regard. Now, constraints, every leader is going to feel this. You're always going to feel like I need to get something done, but I don't have enough blank. I don't have enough time, enough money, enough staff, enough resources, enough support, enough training. So fill in the blank. A constraint is I don't have enough X to accomplish Y. Every leader feels that in every single industry. And then problems is going to be all the popcorn that comes at you. It's just like popping up all the time where you feel like you're a firefighter, and it can include the conflicts, it can include the constraints. But there's going to be so many things that pop up all the time. And I just umbrella that of saying your day all day long is pretty much navigating problems. So that's what you're doing. You're trying to navigate. How do I lead people through these things?
I've heard this phrase, right? Instead of saying a problem, it's an opportunity. Of
Oh,
course,
yes, yes,
in
yes.
the moment,
That
a
that's a
lot of
good mindset switch.
yeah, in the moment, it can be hard to get there, but I think
Mhm.
that's something that we can develop over time. Like, okay, what is this? How is, talking about 2000 cubit rule, how is God going to show up if I make
Mhm.
room for him for this problem, for this constraint, for this conflict? And the Bible is full of all those things, right? It's
Mhm.
very human, right? Some people that talk about the legitimacy of the Bible is like if they were going to put a document together to talk about how right they would probably leave out all of the humanness, all the problems, all the conflicts to make it look like it's so perfect. But it is part of who we are.
Mhm.
And God's working through all of those things. And so, yeah, we have that opportunity to invite him into these things. When you say constraints, I feel like maybe this is my own perspective, but I feel like this is a big one for entrepreneurs, right? They're always looking at, how am I going to accomplish this because of fill in the blank? Is that what
Mhm.
you're running into a good bit when you're helping folks?
Absolutely. And, I myself am an entrepreneur. I left education, right, where I show up, do a great work, hopefully, and then I get my steady paycheck to giving that up and building a business from scratch. So I've felt this, but I also help leaders walk through theirs through their organization, whether they're an entrepreneur or an established organization. But constraints is by far the number one thing. I'm sitting in as a ball of stress saying, I don't know how to navigate this. I don't know how to overcome this because blank. I don't have enough of the blank. And so going back to what you said about the whole point of this podcast, 2000 cubits, something that I really had to wrestle with, most people that are in leadership roles that are out there that are listening to podcasts trying to grow in personal development, you're a high achiever. You're going to go out there, you work at a very high level, you're going to accomplish great things. And I would put myself there, but something that I learned the hard way is I always thought through personal development, reading, organization, systems, processes, all of these things we hear about, that I could outrun always problems, conflicts, and constraints. And it became a stress point, almost like an image management issue for me of why am I still having problems, conflicts, and constraints whenever I'm so proactive? And as a leader, it's holding that so loosely and saying, yes, God created us, designed us to be great leaders. Just look at all the leadership lessons in the Bible. Nehemiah, I'm going to hold a sword in one hand. I'm going to help build the wall with the other, kind of thing. And so, yes, we're so proactive, but you're not going to outrun. Every day on this earth is full of sin and evil and things that we have to deal with. And God is so good to go before us and say, yeah, this one's going to be a struggle. You cannot, in your own power, outstructure all problems, conflicts, and constraints, because then you would be full of arrogance and pride and selfishness and all these things. You need me. So, yes, we have to learn how to navigate that. And the big realization I had as a high achiever is wait a second, as a leader, I'm still going to be proactive in as much as I can to mitigate all of these things, these negative things. But my job as a leader is when they come, and the storms will always come, right? That's what Jesus says. The storms are coming to both sides, is to make sure that I navigate it well and show people and lead people through that storm. This is how we're going to navigate this problem, conflict, or constraint. And not because I know it all. So much of it is surrender of God, I invite you into this moment. Go before me. Show me how to navigate. And a perfect example of this. So my background is in education, but everybody's going to feel this. When COVID happened in 2020, I mean, they shut down everything. They shut down our school. And now we have to flip virtually on a dime, all of these thousands of children, hundreds of teachers. What are you going to do? I'm going to pray an awful lot. God, show me how to lead people through this transition, this change. And so much of it was God softened my heart to the first thing I need to speak to is everybody's anxiety. That's the leadership move first. Connect with the people. It's not really about the task at this point. How can I lead them emotionally so that we can navigate that anxiety? And then we started working on structure and process and all those things. So,
This reminds me of new friend on LinkedIn, which I believe we may have met on LinkedIn as well. But he posted about capacity. Shout out Sung Pike. He wrote a book as well. You can go check him out on LinkedIn. But he had a question about capacity and in general, and it made me think of because my pastor has talked about this in the past about how do you increase your capacity. So constraint is one end of it, and another way to look at it is your capacity. And so I kind of proposed a question like, what's it like to try to increase your capacity? And then he kind of threw it back to me and said, what does it look like when there's these you have constraints or restraints, and identifying like, is this a personal constraint, or is this somewhat an outside restraint, or is this God closing a door, right? Because
mhm.
I was thinking about as you're talking through all these things, if God's closing a door on you, you're never going to get that open, even though you may really want it. So kind of speaking to that conversation too about developing capacity, and when you're working with people, is that something that you try to help people as well?
Absolutely. Whenever I think about capacity, I talk about the phrase humble confidence. You have to start with humility of recognizing you don't have everything you need. You have to go to God first and say, God, open my eyes to noticing, open my ears, open my hands to whatever it is you have before me. And so there's that humility of God has unlimited capacity. Let's just start there. There is no capacity, doesn't exist. He is in charge of everything and has, ultimate power and all of those omni words, right? And so starting in just this humble spot of, I don't have to know it all. I don't have to be it all. I don't have to do it all. Whew, that's a huge sigh of relief because it starts me from a position of joining with God. I'm not in charge of everything. And then you look at the confidence part is now I know that we're going to figure out how to navigate this because God is leading me in it. And so that humility actually leads to a more confident, I would say a stronger backbone of I can have the hard conversation. I can say no to cultural, maybe peer pressure to do things that maybe don't align with my values or my ethics or whatever. I mean, there's so much confidence that comes with the first part of humility of recognizing that God is limitless. I follow him and he will show me how to navigate. Doesn't mean it's not going to be hard. I mean, John 16:33, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. And so recognize that just because it's hard doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It's try to stay in tune. God, give me this day my daily bread. Give me what I need. Provide me with what I need today for this situation to navigate whatever this is and to recognize, give me the spiritual discernment. Is this a door closing? Then guess what? We're going to completely transition and go somewhere else. Is this a door worth opening and going through, but it's hard, but it's going to grow my character, my faith, my team? Think about soldiers in battle. When you go through battle together, there is a brotherhood, if you will, that connects people for life. And so some organizations, especially if you're at a startup, I started a high school from scratch, hiring hundreds of staff all at once to fill these classrooms. I mean, we bonded that first year over who are we? What traditions are we going to have? What, kind of cultural phrases and sayings and, mascots. I mean, everything. We bonded over that. And so that's where you have to start with that humble confidence. Now, depending on who I serve, there's going to be a lot of faith built into that, or it's going to be completely biblical principled, but then, well, okay, you're working in a Fortune 500 company where we can't proselytize. So let's talk about how can you as an individual navigate this? So we have to work through the whole spectrum of it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's so much truth that we've already touched on. And, these are principles, like I said, that are going to help you no matter where you're at. So
Mhm.
you're a stay-at-home mom, you're going to be leading in a very powerful way. Probably the most influential leader on the earth is the
Mhm.
mother. And, or if you are in that Fortune 500 company. So, like you said, there's different types of people that you can work with, and of course that you've done in these different things. And you spoke to it a little bit just then about how you would, transition a little bit of how that is spoken to. But um, tell us a little bit about how you do that when you're working with different types of people and how you help walk them through leadership as opposed to like
Mhm.
leading a whole bunch of teachers versus, a corporate environment.
Absolutely. And, so much of this is, on the rocks. It's a foundation. And so I teach about the body of leadership is you as a leader, and it doesn't matter the role that you play. It does play out at home, especially. And shout out to you for saying, yes, moms are huge leaders, but also a leader of, I mean, Google, Apple, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you lead. You have to nourish and protect your body of leadership. And there's four parts of that. There's the head of leadership, which is your mindset. The biggest battle you face is the one in your own head. And so you have to capture your thoughts. And that's so biblical. Capture your thoughts to Christ, right? But capture your thoughts because your thoughts will lead to, your beliefs, your actions, and all of those things are going to pour out. So you got to capture those thoughts because my job as a leader, I do not want to react to a situation. I want to respond appropriately. If I react, it's going to be a lot of assumptions, a lot of emotion, a lot of even selfishness in there. But if I sit with that and take my thoughts captive and stay curious and ask questions and, hang out with empathy for a while, then I'm going to actually respond to the situation in a better way. So that's the first part, the head of leadership, it's mindset. The second part is the heart of leadership. And that is all about your relationships. How am I connecting with the people that I lead? I have to be able to communicate, collaborate with them. And it's all about learning how to die to self and learn to connect with other people. And so much of that has to do with communication of how do I speak to them? How am I clear? So many times as a leader, we can blame other people for things when it's like, I own that. I didn't communicate clearly. So that's the second part is the heart, of leadership. Now, the third part is the hands of leadership, and that's all about execution. You're actually hired to get a job done. You have to have results, whether it's increased scores, profits, or whatever that is. So it's about execution. How do you create systems and processes in organization so that the work flows smoothly? I cannot tell you the number one mistake here is as a leader, I think everybody thinks like me. And so when I'm talking about something, you know what I'm talking about. You have to make the unseen seen. And so that's why, SOPs are so important, standards of operation and things like that. You've got to have those procedures in place. How do I execute the work smoothly so that we can accomplish what we need to accomplish? And then the fourth one is the guts of leadership. And that is all about accountability. You as the leader have to take ownership of so many things. If you have an employee that's not performing, you have to ask yourself first, was I clear in the expectations? Did I provide training? And I'm not talking about a 1 day training that we all do and say, you're now an expert in your job, go forth. 1 day training never works. You have to have follow up coaching. So, clear expectations, training, coaching. Did I provide all those things? And most of the time, the answer is no. I have to own that as a leader. And then after that, now we're going to start having some hard conversations of, do you need more support? Do you just not have the skill set? Or are you unmotivated? And so accountability is a huge part of stewardship. There's a word that we like to talk about. How am I caring for this team, this organization, this family that God has given me? It's not mine. I'm here to help make it better, but it's not mine. I'm a steward of it. So accountability is huge in that.
Well, there's a couple of things that came to mind as you were talking there. One of the first things, well, I'll touch on is the idea that we see things as we are and as we're built, right? And we often feel that's the most important thing because that's what we know. I've seen this a lot over the years. And I think about the church. You have people that are pastors or evangelists or teachers, and they all feel like this is a generalized statement, but a lot of times you'll find that this is the most important thing that the church should be doing, because if they're not being teaching the people, they don't know the Bible, then it's everything else doesn't matter. While the evangelist is like, if we're not reaching the people and bringing them in, accepting Jesus, nothing else matters. But the
Mhm.
reality is every joint supplies, right? And no matter if it's a major leadership role or you're playing other different kind of role, everybody is important and is needed. And part of the, I think that whole conversation is like you were talking about, understanding, that God created these people different for a reason. And so let's
Mhm.
understand that. And so I saw that you have a DISC, or the DISC giftings.
Oh,
And I feel like that kind of plays into that conversation. For those that maybe don't know that, I've taken those type of assessments. Can you kind of explain what that is and how you use that to help with the leadership process?
absolutely. So DISC is, think of it like a personality assessment, but really, I mean, whether you're talking the Enneagram, the 16 personality types, it doesn't really matter. Colors, dogs, whatever. There's tons of them out there. They're all the same. It's to help you recognize a pattern of behavior, a pattern of way of thinking, of communicating, of working. It's a pattern. And it doesn't mean that you're that way all the time. And so in DISC, there's going to be four. You're going to have a dominant, you're going to have the interpersonal person, you're going to have all of these different personalities. So whether it's 4 or 16, I'm not going to dive it individually into all of those, but we're all made different. God made us different, and the diversity of his creation is so beautiful. And so this is going to help your marriage. It's going to help your friendships, your family relationships, and definitely your work relationships. If you recognize not everybody's like you, not everybody thinks like you, not everybody works like you, not everybody has the same skill set like you. Like Patrick Lencioni just came out with Working Genius, So there's another one that you could look at. But with all of these, the whole point is get to know people, get to know how they tick, get to know how they think, and then try to connect with them. In the church circles, there's also one called the five love languages that's specifically for marriage. It's similar. I have a pattern for how I think and communicate and work. So as a leader, your job now is leading people. You've got to dive into the psychology behind people. How are they wired? How are they built? How can I connect with them, even though it may be different for me? And here's the going back to that humble confidence, the humility piece I said is recognizing that I don't have to do it all. And yes, so much of that is God goes first. But number two is you have a team. That I can't think of a single job out there where you don't interact with somebody. And so there's going to be people that you interact with that are going to help carry that load, whatever that load is, whatever industry you're in. And so when everybody's able to understand and celebrate, hey, you have this strength, you're great at execution. Well, I'm great at, creative problem solving. I love brainstorming, thinking of ideas. My husband hates brainstorming. He hates that. And so, whether we're talking marriage or talking at work, how can we bring everybody's skill sets together as the body of, in church, the body of Christ to serve, or on a team, the different roles on a team to serve and accomplish what we need to accomplish?
Another fun one, I don't know if you run into this, and I'm not sure if there's an actual like program where you can do this, but I've heard, and I believe this to be true, that Jesus, the different types of representations of Jesus also kind of line up with these disc profiles and those, because you have the face of a lion, the face of a man, the ox, and the eagle. And there's these different attributes that he, in the fullness of who he was, understands and modeled like all these different types of leadership
Mhm.
because he's God and he's perfect. So that's totally different. But that's another thing to think about, right? Like here's Jesus, our main leader that we follow, and if we're having issues potentially connecting or understanding other people, who understands them better than Jesus? Like taking
Mhm.
those people to Jesus in prayer, asking Holy Spirit, like, hey, how can I better interact with these folks? Like you understand them, maybe I don't. Of course,
Mhm.
the profiles and all that can really help, but at
Yeah.
the end of the day, Jesus is that leader that can really lead us in those relationships.
Yeah. And, James says, ask if you need wisdom, ask for it. He so graciously will give it. So ask for the wisdom. But Jesus was so good at asking questions. I mean, if anything, stay curious and just ask people questions. Let them reveal their ways of thinking, ways of working, ways of communicating. Just by asking a question. Jesus was so great at that, and I love that about his leader. Well, there's so many things in perfect leadership, but that's one of the things I really take away is he's very great at asking those questions, staying curious, even though he already knows the answer. So let's start with that. I don't, but I can ask the questions.
I loved how Jesus often answered the question with a question, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah,
the
yeah.
Pharisees are really thought they got him, and then they're like, well, then
Hmm.
he flips it on them. And
Yeah.
it never seems like, or at least the Bible doesn't document them complaining about, hey, wait a minute, you never answered the question.
Yeah.
But no, he knew what he was doing for sure. Another
Hmm.
thing that you mentioned earlier that really kind of piqued my interest was, when you're working through and these different challenges, and one of them was you're unmotivated. And
Mm.
so that seems, if you have a team member and somebody's not motivated to do what they've been
Hmm.
assigned to do, and of course that there's a lot of reasons for that, right? Somebody might be working out outside of their gifting or whatever, but in some cases, if someone's not motivated enough, they're going to have to find somewhere else to go, right? Because it's not going to work out. But
Hmm.
as a leader, uh, that's part of it, right? Motivating people. But if you have a team member that is unmotivated, or maybe you yourself are somewhat unmotivated for a reason, how do you address that and help people?
That's such a good question. And I want to go back to you have to start with asking those questions about yourself. Was I clear in the expectation? So many people will accept a job where it was unclear. They had one idea of how that job was supposed to be, or maybe what the responsibilities of that job were, and it ended up being something completely different. There was no clarity and expectation. So, as a leader, you have to first ask, am I clear in the expectation? Am I training? Am I coaching? So let's assume yes to all of those things. And then you have an employee that's just not performing and you think it may be a motivation issue. Number one, you as the leader, you have to have hard conversations. I cannot tell you this is the part that really prompted me to start my business is seeing now in I think schools are the hub of society. You have political pressure, you have economic workforce pressure, you have societal trends going on, hello TikTok challenges and all those things. You have parenting, and then you're part of the community. So everything kind of plays out at the schoolhouse. And so one of my biggest frustrations in dealing with all areas of society was how many people would sweep things under the rug. They would not have hard conversations. You have to step into the uncomfortableness of having a hard conversation. And you have to go in it with humility. You're not right and they're not wrong. And so let's say I have an underperforming employee. I don't start, going in there and saying you. Start with that question. We just talked about Jesus asking questions. Tell me about your work. Tell me about your satisfaction. Tell me about your skill set. Tell me about and it depends on what the situation is. You may be a little more scripted than that, but you're asking those questions to even find out, is it a motivation issue? And if it is, and then you offer those supports and it's not changing, then release that employee. To be clear is to be kind of, you know what? Just because you can't work here doesn't mean that you don't still add value to society, to the, economic workforce, to all these things, but release them to go do something that they are skilled at or motivated in. And it was easy for me as an educator. I won't say easy. These conversations were hard. Let me be clear. Lots of prayer went into these hard conversations as I would occasionally have to release the teacher. But it was so much to be clear is to be kind. I need to be kind. You cannot teach students if you don't like kids. You can't be here in this industry. You have to love children. You may love your content area, but if you don't love children, I'm sorry, you can't work here because the whole point of you is teaching the content to children. And so, you have to find that in whatever that is, whatever your value is in your industry, in your organization, define your values first, and then it will make those hard conversations a little bit easier because you're like, I cannot compromise my values to not offend someone. And nowadays, we wear offense on our sleeves. Everybody's offended at everything. Again, I'm being kind of, you have amazing gifts and skill sets, but they're just not here in this organization. So,
Reminds me of Habakkuk and when he talks about write the vision and make it plain, as you're talking
oh,
about, keep be kind, keep it clear. I
mm-hmm.
think it's something along those lines. This idea that you're writing it down, you're making it plain so that they can run with it, right? That's the scripture. And though it's funny how this scripture says like, wait for it, though it tarry, it will come. It's like this kind of interesting paradox in that particular verse. But yeah, there's like if people are really understanding what the vision of
Mm-hmm.
the company, the organization is, it's clear to everybody. Then when the time comes and they just
Yeah.
step up, they can actually perform and produce the results that are needed at the time.
Absolutely. And by not hiding things under the rug, sweeping things under the rug, you're having 1,000 micro conversations. A lot of times leaders will let things build up to where now it is a one big hard conversation. And my point is, if you are truly to the point of having to release an employee and they didn't see it coming, shame on you. Like there has to be so many micro conversations, feedback, and then as it starts getting serious, then you start the documentation process where they should know all of this is coming. But we don't do that. We have, evaluation check-ins and it's like, oh, just keep doing what you're doing. That is not feedback. That's not helping anybody get better. You have to provide actual specific feedback, even for your, highest of high employees, your high potentials, right? You still need to give them feedback. Your highly talented workforce will leave if they are not growing professionally. So if they are running circles around the rest of their team and they're, Dave Ramsey says it this way, thoroughbred and donkeys don't mix, right? And so you have to provide that feedback and make sure that everybody is upping their game with that feedback loop. So that's just another little tidbit I've learned the hard way. I've learned all these lessons the hard way. I started this off with, I have a lot of limps of, hey, I shouldn't have done that. I needed to have 1,000 conversations before I had that big one. Man, all right, note to self next time. So,
Yeah, that's in the whole realm of people wanting to avoid conflict, right? Because
hmm
and some people are maybe built different where they will, it's okay and in the for them to like have those conversations. For a lot of people though, they got to work through that. And there's a lot of avoidance though, if it's like this is going to be
hmm
uncomfortable, like and so you leave it and
right.
leave it and leave it, and then it's like, okay, you're done.
Yeah.
And
And in Christian circles, I'm going to be very general here. So please understand, it doesn't imply anything. We're so nice, but we're not very kind. Nice is, I can, you know what, I can just tolerate it. Or nice is, well, I don't want to hurt her feelings. And so we avoid all of these conversations that we need to have. And when we have them, again, we approach them with humility. We don't come in and saying, I'm right, you're wrong, or point fingers, that self-righteous anything. We come in with humility of just asking questions and then getting to the root cause of all these issues. And so don't be nice. I'm telling you, don't be nice. Here's your permission slip. Do not be nice. Be kind. Say what's needed because you care truly for the person in front of you.
that's some good wisdom there, folks. As you're whether you're hearing it now or you're watching this on a replay, make sure that you share this, like, comment, do all those things. We know this helps get the word out. Obviously, Bethany has a lot of wisdom and insight that can help organizations, and you can go to leadershiprocks.com to get more of that. And you have so many different things that you've made available to people. One of the things I see that you have on your site is workshops, and then
hmm
you mentioned the five domains of impact. Can you give us a little bit of a teaser of what that's about?
Oh man. So what I have learned is, so many people, especially I've interviewed thousands of people, literally. I was even on like our church board for hiring a new pastor. So tons of interviews in my life. And you ask people, well, what do you want to do? Why do you want this job? Well, I want to make a positive impact. And, I want to change the world, whatever. It's this lofty goal that sounds so good. But the whole point is you cannot change the world without changing your own heart first. And guess what? You don't change your heart. God does. And so the 5 domains of impact, I want you to think of this like a fountain, a cascading fountain. The heart pump is yourself. God, alter my heart, change my heart to align more to who you are. This is, the sanctification process of your whole life of humility, service, align my heart with truly who God is and who he's called me to be. And then that will then push the water up. Think of this cascading fountain into my relationships, all relationships. How am I treating my spouse? How am I serving my kids and leading them? How am I engaging? If I'm in customer service, how am I engaging with that negative customer that's yelling at me right now? Or in my case, a parent I have to throw out of a ball game. And so the relationship piece of that. And then after relationships, it's now going to cascade and flow. My impact is going to grow into the culture of multiple relationships, of larger groups of people. And so if you want to make an impact, it really cascades down these ways. One, self. It always starts with yourself. Then it's your personal relationships. Then it's culture. And then it's going to start going into your organization. And guess what? Organizations come together and they change a community. And that's how you change and make an impact within your community.
Oh, that's some good stuff there, folks. Like I said, leadershipontherocks.com. And like I said, you got the podcast going on. You do have a
Mhm.
book, and you've lots of resources. But for you, that you can work whether it's remote or if someone's close to you, I
Mhm.
guess you can do that. But when you're talking about workshops and these kind of things, can you give us an idea of what's the environment like?
Absolutely. So I do have, some foundational pieces which I design, but I'm a teacher at heart. I personalize it to what you need. So I'm not going to say, you know what, I'm going to come in and give my same spiel. I'm going to ask a lot of questions. You know, what's going on in your organization? Tell me about where you see gaps. What do you think, if you could solve one problem today that would have the biggest impact, what would that one problem be? And asking those questions, then I personalize all right, is it individual coaching? Do we need coaching for the leadership team? Is it a workshop? Is it a retreat? I've done all of these things, but so much of what I offer is so personalized to what you need. But the whole point is whenever we as leaders become better leaders and better individuals ourselves, guess what? There's the impact. It's going to make better relationships, better culture, better organizations. And so I've done the whole gamut. I've done virtual, I've done in person. It's all based upon where you at. And I also I recognize leadership is needed everywhere. And so I do different things for large organizations, for school districts, for nonprofits. My heart is also, hey, even if you run a nonprofit and you have the lowest of the lowest budgets, you still need leadership development. So I work with all kinds of people and all kinds of things. It just depends on where you're at. So just schedule a call on my website, leadershipontherocks.com. You can schedule a free discovery call. Let's chat and let's talk and see where I can serve you and help you grow in leadership.
Amazing. Well, I want to get a testimony if I could from someone that you don't have to name them or whatever, but I'd love to hear like somebody that you've worked with and just help them on their leadership journey. And yeah, just to get a little bit of an idea of some of the impact, talking about impact that you've had.
Oh, thanks. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to give two because they're
Yeah.
different. And one, I worked with the church. I told you I work with all kinds of organizations. And the church, has such a heart for serving people and, being the hands and feet of Christ. But as an organization, this church was really struggling with any kind of HR policy and practices. That's from hiring processes to onboarding to communicating about evaluations. Like the church as an organization still has to have those processes in place. And so I worked with this church, and it was a church plant. And they were really struggling with their HR policies and practices and coming on board and just designing those systems. And they were like, we spend so much time in serving and being the hands and feet of Christ that we kind of drop the ball in the stewardship of the organization as a whole because, how are we properly vetting the people that we're bringing in to now lead other people? So their testimony was helping them to open their eyes to something that they needed that they didn't even, they felt all the issues that they were having on the back end, but they couldn't get to the root cause of how do I turn this thing around? And it turned out just being simple systems and processes in the HR thing. So that was the church. And then I do work a lot with education. And so, the biggest battle that so many people are facing is the stress of dealing with behaviors and children and administrators. Think about that. You're just constantly, they feel like they're babysitting kids, and a lot of bad behaviors are coming because of it. And it's like, but how do you work through the mental stress of the head of leadership, that mindset? And that, if once you get that corrected, you experience your job in a completely different way where you show up in those situations with actual joy. We talk about that in church of, I know what it is to be poor. Paul talks about, that content, that joy, and all those things. Philippians, the book of joy. And it's helping educators specifically as they're working through some hard situations with behaviors of how do you capture your mindset so that you can respond to those behaviors. A behavior is a red flag for a need by a child. What's the need of the child? But if you're reacting to everything because you're emotional about it. So anyway, I've worked with a lot of educators, but specifically, that's the number one feedback I get is I didn't realize the battle was in my head.
Funny enough, just this morning I saw a little comedy reel by a lifelong teacher, it looked like, and she probably is like an influencer in the space. And she was
Mhm.
just like, what I hear every day. And it's like all these phrases, I need to go to the bathroom. And, do we really have, is this for a
Mhm.
grade? All the stuff that every teacher, because when you go in
Mhm.
the comments, it was like, are you in my classroom? So it's a universal experience of all these things that you just mentioned about the
Mhm.
behaviors that teachers have to work through in order to get through the day and get these kids educated. So
Mhm.
it's amazing that you are helping those folks and giving them the tools to succeed, not just, the fact that you can teach them some, good principles, but actually it's
Mhm.
helping them find joy. That's amazing.
Mhm.
So yeah, we want to make sure people do go to that website, get resourced. If you need leadership help, people like Bethany, God's put you here on the earth to help equip us. So that's amazing. But I want to give you the final word as well. Like if you just have an encouragement for the folks watching, what would you leave with us today?
I would just say make sure that you have the daily habit of spending time with God. Everything that we do in life, you're going to have storms. You just want to make sure you don't build a sandcastle life that's going to blow over based upon, every wind of circumstance or change. And so you want to build your life, your family, your leadership on the rocks, with the most essential rock being Jesus. And how you do that in Matthew chapter 7, he says, he who hears and puts into practice these words of mine. And so you got to hear the word of Jesus. You've got to put them into practice, and that requires you spending time with God. Think about a marriage. I can't say I love my husband, but never spend time with him. You have to spend time with God. So get in his word, read scripture, pray, and let God change your heart from the inside out. And when that storm comes, because it's coming, you're going to find that you're going to stand a lot stronger and you'll know how to navigate through it.
Amen. That's a good word, Bethany. So grateful for spending time with us and letting us get a little bit of a sneak peek into the leadership principles and everything you have to offer. And just appreciate your time with us. For
Thank you
everybody
so much
else,
for having me.
yeah, for everybody else, so thankful that you were a part of the 2000 Cubit Rule today. We'll see you next time.